Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Back with us, author John Brewer. He moved frequently as a child, living in Kansas, Oklahoma, California, Alaska, and Alberta, Canada. He studied at Johns Hopkins University with a BA in biology in 1960, PhD in biochemistry in 1963. He took his postdoctoral experience at the University of Illinois from 1963 to 1966. His career started at the University of Georgia in 1966, from assistant to associate to full professor at the University of Georgia. Has written over 100 professional scientific publications, and he's written 4 historical novels, which we'll talk about in the program today. He's been reading history books as a hobby for many years. His books are Mathew, Dobbs, Esquire, Terpsichore, Millwood Village, Goodman's Croft. And on the program before, we've talked about Terpsichore and Goodman's Croft. Those are available if you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on to YouTube's. On the program today, talking about Mathew, Dobbs, Esquire, and Millwood Village, LC. John Brewer back with us. John, welcome back. Great to have you with us on the program.
Thank you. Satisfied customers always come back.
Always come back. And I love having the opportunity.
But
I love having the opportunity to read the books, and we talked about this before, and we'll tease it at the end with the new book that you've got coming out, Pilgrim's Journey. Let's talk a little bit. We've not really done that before, about your background and where this fascination with history came from. And I mentioned that you traveled a lot as a child, you moved a lot as a child, and you described yourself in childhood as somewhat shy. Was reading sort of an escape for you? Is that how you dealt with all of that?
Very definitely. Very definitely. History moved me into another world. Of course, some novels did as well, but I seem to focus on history. Years after my father died, I discovered he was a history major at University of California, Berkeley, so maybe it's hereditary.
Yeah, it was somewhat genetic, and you didn't even know it. And I'm somewhat surprised that you decided at an early age that you were interested in chemistry, and that's what you pursued academically. Were there any thoughts along the way to maybe I should try to do something in history?
No. I was always interested in science. I was always wanted to become an academic scientist, and I did. So I fulfilled my goals, and just recently I decided to start writing.
You know, I mentioned in the beginning the over 100 professional scientific publications, and that was a goal of yours. When you reached that level with your interest in history, your interest in writing, was that sort of the next logical step, was let's see if I can write some history books?
I'm not sure if it was logical. There are still projects I want to do in the lab, but I've always had stories running around in my head, and some of them get very elaborately worked out, even to the dialogue. And I think I finally decided to start writing them down. But it's a curious thing. When you start writing these things down, sometimes the stories take themselves into their own control, as it were, and you wind up writing stories that aren't the same as what you intended. I don't know what that means. I think there was an inner logic to the plot that I hadn't grasped at first, and that finally took over, so that I started following the inner logic of the plot.
So you sort of listen to the characters as you go. In fact, one review says there are times when the action unfolds so realistically that it feels more like a movie than a tale on a page. Is that sort of what happens in your mind as you're writing it too, where you can sort of visualize where it's going and you just sort of sit back and see what's next?
Yes. It can be frustrating, but it's fun.
Well, and it's fun reading. John Brewer is our guest on This Week in America. His website is historomance.com. That's HISTOROMANCE.com. Of course, go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on directly to John's website. We're going to talk about two of the four books today, Mathew Dobbs, Esquire, and Millwood Village, L.C. The other books we've talked about, and again, those interviews are available on our YouTube channel. You can get that directly from going to the website, thisweekinamerica.us, Terpsichore and Goodman's Croft. Let's start with Mathew Dobbs, Esquire. Tell us a little bit about him. He's orphaned at age 4 and has a really interesting life, and then his life carries on in the book Millwood Village, L.C. Talk a little bit about Mathew, the character.
Well, he is orphaned and grows up in a very strange household, and he grows up quirky. Learns how to cook, clean chicken houses, but he's very conscious. This was during the late Victorian era in England. He's very conscious of his lack of social status, and he very much wants to be a gentleman, so he's got a lot of drive, a lot of energy, and the only things he can do are academic pursuits, and that's what he does. He does well in school, manages to get into the University of London, and this after meeting the older daughter of a liberal ex-member of Parliament, a peer, and falling in love with her. So he's very determined to try to make a gentleman of himself. Hence, he wants to be known as Esquire. Not just Mathew Dobbs.
But Mathew Dobbs, Esquire. People who have reviewed your series of books talk about the attention to detail and the development of the characters. Obviously, that's very important to you because as you're reading these people, they're very believable. They're very well-rounded. Again, when you start the process, do you have them fully developed, or does this evolve as well in the storytelling?
The story is worked out in my head, but yes, there is character development. And there are themes in the book. I don't write the books on the basis of, well, I'll try this theme or that theme. When I've finished writing a story, it will occur to me that, hey, there's a theme here. With Terpsichore, it was social isolation. All the three principal characters grew up socially isolated. Two of them overcame this because of their love for each other, and the third one did not and descended into madness and death. In Mathew Dobbs, Esquire, he's striving to become a gentleman, and this was what the First World War did. It shook things up. It shook things up socially. Men who became officers who, before the war, would never have been considered officer material, and some of them turn out pretty well. And an officer, though the officer might be known as a temporary gentleman, was nonetheless a gentleman. And some of them were able to, because of the heavy casualty rate as well, marry much better than they would have had there been no war. So it promoted social mobility. In Mathew's case, certainly. Although the woman that he met and eventually marries has been working as a nurse, and she's a little bit outside the box herself. Mathew grew up being outside the box, which is sometimes very worthwhile and occasionally gets him into trouble. But he's able to marry the daughter of a peer, and so is a gentleman on that base score himself.
Yeah,
so,
this book is Mathew Dobbs, Esquire. And again, reviewers will look at that and go, you really do an excellent job of capturing, in this particular case, a British gentleman during that era. How difficult is that going back, and how extensive is the research where you feel like, I understand now what it was like to be a gentleman in Britain at that time?
Uh, I've read a great deal. Fiction is another part of it too. Uh, that also emphasized the dichotomy between gentlemen and everybody else. Uh, but he's aspiring, if only because he was in love with this elder sister, who was the daughter of a peer, as I said, and very much wanted to be accepted in those circles. So the war helped him get there eventually. And as I said, it really shook things up in Britain socially.
That yes, and you capture all of that. The book is Mathew Dobbs, Esquire. Our guest in the program is John Brewer. His website is historomance.com, HISTOROMANCE.com. You can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on directly, get information on all of the books. And then, Mathew, we follow into the next historical novel, Millwood Village, L.C. Give us
Yes.
a little background here, because we see Mathew in a different light in this situation, and he's going through some tough times.
The story opens, well, he's been married 20 years to this woman, Frances, very happily married. He's a headmaster of a public school. But there was a bureaucratic glitch, and when the Second World War broke out, he was hauled in again because he was never actually officially discharged from the first, uh, which kind of alienated him, alienated his whole family, in fact. But the story opens when he gets a letter from his sister-in-law, that's the older daughter, who threw him over, telling him that his wife, Frances, was dead. She was killed in the Blitz. And he's shattered by this. He's a staff officer now for Bernard Montgomery, and they're fighting the Germans at El Alamein. And he sees that there are some people in the long-range desert force who are going to go out, and they say they're going to go out and try and cut off the German retreat. And they say, "Do you want to come along?" And Mathew says, yes. He just leaves his position as a staff officer, climbs on board these Bren carriers, and they set off on what turns out to be a suicide mission. Later on, he does survive, but he wakes up in a hospital, he's sedated, and there are a lot of flashbacks describing his life with Frances. And the project that Mathew came up with of the Millwood Village, it's a planned community on the Millwood estate. His wife and the older sister's maiden names were Millwood. So the village was Mathew's idea because there was this piece of land that wasn't being used for anything, and it turns out to have been a very good idea. It was a very profitable venture. But as I said, Mathew sometimes can come up with some very good ideas.
And talk
And as
about
I
the
said,
yeah, talk about the relationship with the older sister now, because this really starts to form at this time.
well, it had started to form in the first book, and he had asked her to marry him. The cover of the Mathew Dobbs Esquire has got this ring here linking with two women and him.
It's a very
He
colorful
bought that
cover.
for the
And
older sister.
yeah, and you can see that by going to John's website, historomance.com, or go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and log on, or go to Amazon and look at that, because, yeah, that sort of symbolizes the quandary that he was in, the dilemma that he was in. And I said, yeah, he was sort of able, well, pick up with the relationship, because he's finally able to do something about it now.
Well, she married someone else, a guy who looked really good on paper. And they were married more than 25 years, and Mathew finally gets some leave, goes back to England. He gets an appointment on the staff of General Montgomery, commanding the Normandy invasion force. But his own wife is dead, and he feels still desolated by this. They were very close. He finds that his older sister is newly widowed, and things warm up rather quickly. Because eventually, later on, she tells him that he's the only man she ever loved.
This is all in Millwood Village, L.C. Now, the 4 books, Mathew Dobbs, Esquire, we talked about. Sequel to that is Millwood Village, L.C. We've talked on previous programs about 2 of John's books, Terpsichore and Good Man's Croft. A couple minutes left in the program. And information, you can purchase the book. You can find information available at John's website, historomance.com. Go to our website or go to Amazon. They're all featured there. The new book that we're going to touch on just briefly here is Pilgrim's Journey. Give us a brief synopsis about that. And Wednesday, I see the cover now. If you catch us on YouTube, you'll see the cover there. So that's obviously ready to go.
It's out.
Tell me a little bit about what that's about.
It's another coming-of-age story. This young man grows up in colonial Massachusetts, falls in love with a daughter of a Tory landowner, beautiful young woman, who tells him eventually that she has to marry the son of a Tory, that is, British sympathizer from another province, and he's devastated. But it was her influence that inspired him to go to medical school. So he decided to go to the best medical school in Britain at the time, which was the University of Edinburgh. And he sets forth, and that's his first journey. He gets his medical degree, supporting himself, goes down to London, sets up in practice with a friend, meets another woman, an apothecary's daughter, falls in love with her. Then he gets a letter telling him that his first love is probably in New York, may need his help, which he had pledged to give. And his younger sister's fiancé is in a prison camp, well, prison ship, also in New York, and they want him to, his sisters want him to go find out how they are, give them help if he can.
The book is
next journey.
Pilgrim's Journey. That's obviously out, and you'll get information at the website as well. What are you working on now?
The third one, we've decided on a title, Golden Mary. That was a little difficult to come up with. The first 2 titles I came up with, my wife went on the web and found 3, and in the other case 15 books with the same names, but Golden Mary was okay. Dickens wrote a short story, The Wreck of the Golden Mary, but I figured that was okay. It's just set in 1536, Tudor England, reign of Henry VIII. Features a lot of sword fighting and lust and good things like that.
I am looking forward to having the opportunity to talk about that. So many books, and I'll go through these again. Mathew Dobbs, Esquire, that we talked about today, followed by Millwood Village, LC. Both these books are available, as are all of John's books, at his website, which is historomance.com. Also at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. The other two books that we've talked about, Terpsichore and Good Man's Croft, and you can watch both of those interviews on our YouTube channel by simply going to our website and clicking on the link there for YouTube. So, and then Pilgrim's Journey is out as well. John, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Historomance is his website, and I'll spell it again. It's HISTOROMANCE, historomance.com. John, congratulations on more good work, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure. You're listening to This Week in America, our website, thisweekinamerica.us.